Christine and Paul had been married for 4 years when she decided to change jobs. Her old position had become a dead end. No real chances to grow professionally, and to make things worse, her paychecks were often late. So when an opportunity came along that offered a better work environment and promising career prospects, she jumped at it. Paul had been genuinely happy for her. After all, she'd left behind a close-knit team she'd really bonded with, simply to pursue something more stable and fulfilling. It felt like the right move. But that initial excitement didn't last long. Less than a month after she started working in her new position, Christina started coming home later and later. At first, she was delayed for half an hour. Then it started going on for a whole hour, and soon she was 2 hours late almost every evening. Paul usually picked her up after work, but after waiting several times for 30 to 40 minutes, Christina finally told him not to worry. She would come by car. Naturally, Paul started to worry. He gently asked if she was at least getting paid for all that extra time. Christine explained that the company didn't pay overtime to new hires. It was just how things worked there. She needed to prove herself, build some trust with the higher-ups. Plus, since they used unfamiliar software, tasks took her longer than expected. By staying late, she could catch up without distractions. Since she was the only newcomer and everyone else had already gone home. Even though the explanation didn't exactly ease his mind, Paul decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. He figured she was trying hard to make a solid impression and build a future at her new job. He didn't want to stand in her way. Every now and then, though, Paul checked in to make sure she wasn't pushing herself too hard. One evening, he gave her a ring, but she didn't answer right away. He waited, thinking maybe she'd stepped out or was buried in work. 10 minutes passed. He tried again. This time, she picked up, sounding upbeat and cheerful. "Hey, babe, you've been working late. Any idea what time you'll be home?" he asked. "Oh, I'm still at the office," she said brightly. "Just wrapping up one last thing. I'll be home soon." Just as Christine was about to hang up, Paul caught a strange little sound in the background, something like an alarm or a ping. It was brief, barely noticeable, and he didn't give it much thought at the time. Over the next few days, though, similar sounds popped up now and then during their phone calls. Later that week, Paul made plans to catch up with Vlad, an old college buddy. They agreed to meet at a shopping mall. Vlad had to swing by a repair shop before dinner. When Paul arrived, he spotted his friend emerging from the tech repair store with a grin plastered across his face. "Man, finally got my smartwatch back," Vlad beamed, holding it up like a trophy. "Felt totally naked without it this past week." They found a cafe nearby and sat down to chat. As they sipped their drinks, Paul suddenly heard that same beeping noise again, the one that had been bugging him all week. He instinctively turned around, scanning the area. "Oh, that's just my watch," Vlad said with a chuckle. "Don't worry, it's got alarms, reminders, the whole 9 yards." He tapped the screen and silenced it, and that's when it hit Paul. That same sound, the one he'd been hearing during calls with Christine. But something didn't add up. Christine didn't own a smartwatch, or at least she'd never mentioned one. And hadn't she said she was the only newbie in her department? The pieces weren't fitting together, and an uneasy feeling began to settle in Paul's chest. The next morning, driven by a mix of worry and suspicion, Paul decided to see things for himself. He called in sick and headed to Christine's office under the pretense of dropping off something she'd forgotten. When he arrived, she greeted him warmly, and they chatted casually by her desk. Everything seemed perfectly normal, until that familiar squeak pierced the air again. Paul's eyes narrowed. He raised a finger, signaling Christine to pause. The sound was close, too close. He turned toward it, and there, just a few desks away, was a man tapping his smartwatch to silence the noise. Their eyes met. Something about the guy's face struck a chord. Paul's memory clicked. He'd seen this man before, weeks ago, on the very first day he'd picked Christine up from work. The guy had stepped out of the building for a smoke just as Christine had gotten into the car. When Paul asked her about him, she brushed it off, saying he was probably from another office in the building. It had seemed plausible at the time. Christine, sensing the tension, quickly clarified that the man was just a colleague. She even pointed out a few others nearby, all laughing and chatting by the water cooler. The atmosphere seemed light and friendly. Still, Paul couldn't shake the unease. His instincts were screaming, but he tried to keep cool. Then, one of Christine's coworkers, grinning like a kid with a secret, sauntered over and joked, "So you're the new girl's husband, huh?" He nudged Paul playfully. Lucky guy. Another colleague chimed in with a teasing offhand remark that crossed the line. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said it, the tone. Paul's jaw clenched. He felt something twist in his gut. Not jealousy, exactly. More like a quiet, simmering anger mixed with confusion. Something wasn't right. Things quickly spiraled out of control. One of Christine's coworkers, clearly trying to stir the pot, made a smug comment about staying late to show her a new program. Christine's cheeks flushed a deep red as she turned her gaze to the floor, avoiding Paul's eyes. That was the last straw. Fury bubbling just beneath the surface, Paul stepped forward and went straight at the man. Before anyone could stop him, fists were flying. It wasn't just a scuffle. It was raw emotion, years of trust unraveling in a matter of seconds. Chaos erupted around them as colleagues jumped in, trying to pull them apart. Paul managed to land a solid blow before they dragged him away and escorted him out of the office. Bruised and seething, he walked off without another word. Christine, rattled and humiliated, ran after him. As Paul stormed toward the parking lot, she caught up, her eyes darting to the bruises forming on his face. "Please, Paul," she began, reaching for him, but he jerked his arm away. "Don't, just don't," he snapped. His voice was cold, sharp as glass. "Tell me the truth. Did you sleep with him, Christine? Just say it. Look at what you've done. Own it." She stood frozen, hands trembling, lips parted but unable to speak. Her eyes brimmed with tears, and finally barely a nod. Then she covered her face, crumbling under the weight of what she'd just confessed. Paul's voice dropped to a whisper, full of heartbreak. "How could you?" She tried to speak, to explain something, anything, but the words came out in sobs. "I didn't mean for it to happen. Please forgive me." But there was nothing left to say. Paul's jaw tightened. He couldn't even look at her. He turned and marched to the car, slammed the door, and took off. Deep down, he figured she'd get the message and not show up at the apartment. But she did. That night, Christine stood on his doorstep, pleading, her voice hoarse from crying. She promised to quit her job, suggested they start over, maybe even start a family. She said she'd do whatever it took to fix things, to become the woman he once believed in. But to Paul, "Pack your things," he said coldly, "and go." The next morning, Paul filed for divorce. Christine found shelter with her older sister, who lived alone. She wasn't looking to get back together with her former lover. Far from it. She just wanted to move on quietly, bury the shame, and hold on to what little dignity she had left. What she didn't realize was that the man she had risked everything for had a pattern. He was known for seducing new hires, especially the ones he sensed wouldn't stick around for long. Christine had just been another name on a list. Crushed by regret and eaten up by guilt, she started slipping at work. Her focus was gone. One careless mistake after another piled up, until a serious blunder with an important client sealed her fate. She was let go not long after. In the end, it wasn't just one poor decision that tore the marriage apart. It was the blind trust in a fleeting thrill, and the arrogance of a man who didn't care who got hurt. Every day, life throws temptations at us, and in those moments, we choose between what's fleeting and what truly matters, between impulse and love, between betrayal and loyalty. And those choices, they shape everything that comes after.